Okay, awesome. I am so excited for today's interview because I've heard a lot about Ayurvedic before. I really don't know that much about it, except for somebody told me that I have heat once, which is the thing that starts with a P. I'll let you explain everything because I have no idea what I'm talking about. Um, so I'm so excited because we have on Ameya Duprey here, and she is an Ayurvedic postpartum doula. She combines the two in such a unique way to really help moms recover after having babies. And so she's going to tell us a little bit about herself, dive into what even is Ayurvedic, if I'm even pronouncing it right, and and even talking on what postpartum doulas do and how she combines it all together. So I'm so excited that she's on the podcast today. So thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. So, my name is Ameya Duprey, and like she said, I'm an Ayurvedic postpartum doula. I'm also an Ayurvedic practitioner, massage therapist, author, and course creator. And yeah, so Ayurveda, for those that don't know, literally means the science of life. And it's the holistic healing science from India. So it's like the natural healing science from India. So similar to if you've heard of acupuncture, Chinese medicine, it's like that, but from India. And so Ayurveda encompasses all of life, like the name, science of life. And so there's an Ayurvedic way to do everything. And basically, it's based off of the five elements at the most basic foundational level of ether or space, air, fire, water, and earth. And so that is like the very core of Ayurveda. And then those elements expand exponentially into the natural world. So we have all of those elements inside of our bodies, as well as the trees and the grass and every aspect of creation. And so we have individual different levels of the elements. And so each of us has our own individual constitution as well. And so when you break that down, it's vata, pitta, and kapha. So vata is made up predominantly of the air and ether elements, and pitta, like you were saying, the fire element. So that is pitta, and that's fire mostly with a little bit of water. And then kapha is water and earth. And so we all are made up of these elements. We all have all three doshas inside of us, but we all have a predominant constitution. So that is like a very small introductory aspect of Ayurveda, because some people are like, oh yeah, like I've heard of Vata or Pitta and about the body types. So that's what that is. And when it comes to postpartum, luckily, it's everybody has the same imbalance that we're working with. So that makes it very easy to deal with. Whereas, like, if are just going to a Ayurvedic practitioner to work on your general health, then it can get much more complicated. But luckily, in this case with postpartum, all mamas deal with the same imbalance, which is the imbalance of air and ether in their body. So it's the vata imbalance that we'll be working with. So we can get into that a little bit later. But yes, so as an Ayurvedic postpartum doula, it's different than a regular postpartum doula in the sense that we're educated in these aspects of Ayurveda. So there's a specific diet that is recommended in order to balance all of the elements that become out of balance during the birth, and it's a totally natural thing. But so, we have a special diet and we have special practices that we help the mamas with to help them get back into balance, instead of just being like helping with general cooking, or holding the baby, or doing chores or laundry or something like that. So it's a very specialized thing where I'm working specifically with the mama and helping her recover from birth fully, so that she can have all of the energy that she needs to thrive instead of just survive after having.
Mhm. It's so interesting how you're saying that, like, if we're dealing with a different health issue, you kind of have to figure out what imbalance is off in the body. But when it comes to postpartum, it's the same for everybody. Like, how is that even a thing?
Well, since you asked, so when you have a baby, there are certain qualities that become out of balance. So, for example, like, you become very dry, your whole body becomes very cold. There's a roughness involved, there's some irregularity that happens. And so, for example, like those can manifest in, like constipation. That's something that most mamas deal with after birth, where it's like, oh, take a stool softener or something because, and so that's the dryness. And that's also the irregularity. And so when you give birth, there's so much fluid loss, and also if you're breastfeeding, then that's a constant fluid loss. And it's really hard to get that, to really replenish that, and like just drinking a lot of water isn't going to do it. And so there are certain things like that where it's like, okay, if I know, this basic thing of like there's dryness in the body. So it's like, okay, how do I fix that? So it's not just water, because water, of course, you need to be hydrated. But even taking it a step further and getting the oils in your body, lots of nourishing oils in your body on and outside of your body. And that really just like replenishes all of your cells that have been, depleted from all of the energy that you've given for in the birthing process and afterwards. So that's like an example of, some of the qualities. Or coldness. You exert so much energy when you birth your baby into the world that your entire body becomes cold. And so you need to rekindle your energy. And that also means rekindling your digestive fire. So that's something that all mamas deal with after birth, whether they realize it or not, is having a really sensitive digestive system, like just as sensitive as your newborn baby. So that's how how mamas should be treated, after they've given birth. They're actually going through a rebirth themselves, and their whole body it's like setting a reset button on your health. So it's really important to make sure that that the mamas are being properly nourished and properly cared for, because they've just been through such a amazing creative process. That is a really, really big deal. And I feel like this is part of my mission, is to, help people understand how big of a deal postpartum is. I know mamas that have already had a baby know that, but maybe they didn't before, because in our culture, it's like we're focused more on prenatal care and the birth. And then it's like, okay, you're on your own after the baby's born. And in Ayurveda, actually, postpartum is given much more precedence than prenatal care.
Hmm, that's interesting. It it is, we do focus definitely on care during pregnancy. But even plans, I feel like having a postpartum plan in place is something that there is such a lack of, and how we like, even like being a doula myself, I had stuff in place for after I had my first, as far as just I did a bunch of food prepping and all these different things. Um, but still, instead of like focusing on my own healing and even just bonding with the baby, I immediately went to basically, am I doing this right? It like, how many hours should she be sleeping? Oh, should I be doing this? Should I be doing, like, just that overwhelm, instead of really trying to just tap in, be present, be in tune. And you see that so much more with other cultures, that they do that. They leave room for that. There's, in a lot of cultures, the 40 days after birth, some people don't even leave the house, and you're at home, you're being taken care of. So the only thing you have to do is bond with your baby. The only thing you have to do is focus on that relationship with you and your newborn, versus everybody else in the house, everybody else in your life, and even yourself. Somebody's there taking care of you, so that you're not like, oh, I have to get up and cook for myself, for my whole family, forever. It's this like really leaving that room for that first 40 days. And I feel like that's something we've gotten so far away from, that I I feel like I was able to do it more with my second, because my mom was here for a month after, um and was playing with my toddler. But I'd love to like do it even more, like have even more meals planned and really pay attention to those foods because um I did my best, but then life gets chaotic, right? And so it's like, how do we know how to really properly re-nourish ourselves after? Like, what are we depleted in? What needs to be replaced? How do we take care of that sensitive gut that might be going on? So I'd love for you to talk about um, the diet side of it a little bit.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Yeah, it's we're such at a disadvantage, in our culture in that way of like, like other cultures like you're talking about. Many different traditional cultures, they have their mamas and their family like taking care of them. And, I see that even the different sides of that in the Indian community in the United States too, and just it's just really interesting because we don't really have that. And so that's kind of where an Doula really can come into play, if you're lucky enough to have one in your area, to have some of that wisdom that we've lost, and it's not our fault, but it is what it is. So we're just kind of, we're needing to regain that wisdom that was lost through the generations of our travels over to America or whatever it is, the modernization and everything. But yeah, the diet is so important. I would say it's not all. And so I would say it's about 50% of your postpartum healing. And so, yes, the diet is very important. I know, at least in my community, a lot of mamas do like to do a meal train, where, friends and family sign up to bring meals and things like that, which is really, really great. Um, but the trick is it to not turn into like a potluck type of situation where you have once you have an understanding of the types of foods that nourish your body and the steps that you need to take to build your digestive fire. Um, and if you're able to, send recipes to your family and friends, that is the way I like to recommend it. I have my postpartum Ayurvedic cookbook mama's menu. So I usually just have people take pictures of that and send it out. But let's talk about the diet. So there's the most important thing about your diet is that you have to nourish your digestive fire. So after you have a baby, the digestive fire is pretty much cold. And so you need to rekindle that digestive fire carefully. Um, so my personal recommendation for your first food after birth is a rice congee, and rice congee is very popular in Asian cultures, but it's basically a rice that's been cooked for a very long time, maybe 8 hours or something like that in the slow cooker with lots of digestive spices. Like spices like chai spices are really good for postpartum, like ginger and cinnamon and um, nutmeg and cardamom, and clove is really good, especially in the beginning, because it really is like fiery. So it really sparks that digestive fire. So I feel like I just want to say that there's like a common misconception that spices are bad for postpartum. And so I just want to clarify that yes, I would say chilies are not good during postpartum. You can do a little bit of cayenne, but other than that, like chili peppers and stuff like that are not good. But in general, spices for the most part are good, and they're actually really
Spice
quite,
is good. Not you're saying like not necessarily spicy, but
yes.
spices, right? Yeah. Chilies just sound like they would have made my hemorrhoids burn. So
Oh my God. They would have
not
for
good. Not
sure.
good. Right. But
Yeah.
whereas like even the spices that you're describing, when you think of cinnamon and cardamom and like you automatically think warming. To me, that's like, oh, Christmas time, a mug by the fire. It's so
Yes.
warm. It's cozy.
Exactly. That's what you want. You want that cozy, warming feeling, and that's like what you're going for in general,
Mhm,
especially in the beginning
mhm.
of your postpartum diet. So you're thinking like warm, soupy, nourishing, oily, easy to digest foods. So like the rice congee, that's what that is. There's lots of sweetness and ghee, ideally, which is clarified butter, which is really good. Um, and spices. And so that's like, it's funny because actually when somebody looks at the recipe, sometimes they're like, oh my God, like that's a lot of coconut sugar or whatever, oil, ghee. And, from like a regular person's perspective, it is. But when you're like that in that position as just having a baby, mamas just eat that stuff up. Like literally, they love it. And it's so soothing to their system after such a intense experience. And getting all of that ghee also and moisture and in their body will help them have that bowel movement right away. So that's also important because it's scary to have, your first bowel movement afterwards. There's just like so much energy, maybe pain and hemorrhoids and whatever down there. It's like, to have like a nice smooth move.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah. I
really
didn't think it was bad with my first, even though I got a small hemorrhoid with her, but with my second, I'm like, I would almost rather give birth again than poop because my hemorrhoids were so bad. I was like, yeah, I would rather push my daughter out versus feeling like I'm pooping out glass shards right now.
oh
It's
my goodness.
awful.
It's so awful. That was honestly
But you
my
have to poop.
yes, you definitely do. You definitely do. That was definitely my worst like experience after having the baby was hemorrhoids.
Yeah,
So
same.
yeah, it's
Same. I'm like already scared for like the next one. I'm like, I
yeah.
feel like I could do labor. I got this. Hemorrhoid part, no thanks. Like,
Oh,
no, no.
no,
But
it's so bad.
poop sidetrack, which happens a lot with me. Um, okay, so we're getting these like warm, spicy, soothing, and also like good calorie rich foods
Yes.
that are replenishing and healing. Even now, I eat a ton of butter. I mean, I don't just eat it, but like that's what I cook my eggs in the morning. And like, like I do not shy away from like any sort of like olive oil or grass fed or clarified butter. I use it all the time in everything.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. And it depends too on your constitution. Like some people, butter is really good for them, And in general, ghee is what they call tridoshic, so it's good for everyone. So even if you're someone who is more kapha, which is more like earthy, and maybe shouldn't be having lots of oil and sugar and that kind of stuff, like ghee is actually something that you can still have in moderation, which is
Mhm.
nice. So it's one
Mhm.
of those foods that is just
And
very
it's
healing.
well, it's not as hard to find as it used to be either. Like I remember I got a giant tub of it at Costco like
Mhm.
a couple of years ago. I haven't bought it there in a while, but like pretty much every place carries it now.
Good. Yeah.
So it's not like for people listening, if they're like, what even is ghee? Am I gonna have to go to some like weird store to try to find it? It's like, no, you can find it anywhere.
Yeah, yeah, it is easy to find and it's actually super easy to make. Just
Oh,
you
interesting.
literally, yeah, you literally just take the butter, simmer it until all of the water is evaporated, and then you just strain it through like a cheesecloth, and then
Hmm.
that's it. So it's just a
Sounds like a
pure
lot of work to me.
maybe depending. But yeah. But yeah,
Depending on your season of life.
exactly.
Yeah.
Oh.
So you want lots of the warming foods postpartum.
Yeah, so lots of warming foods, especially in the beginning, you're really, really wanting to rekindle your digestive fire. So, so spices like that. Also, I just want to point out, well, onions are not recommended for postpartum. And garlic, I know there's some controversy about garlic, so let me just clear that up. So, garlic in general, um, is not necessarily good unless it's prepared in a certain way, then it becomes an amazing medicine. So basically, all you need to do is just simmer it in some sort of oil or ghee, and then it becomes an amazing galactagogue and just like very good rejuvenative. Also, obviously, helps with immunity. But if you don't prepare it in that way, if you bake it or if you use powder or raw, then it's the opposite. It does not help you postpartum, and if you're breastfeeding, it can cause issues with your baby. But on the other hand, when it's simmered in ghee or oil, it becomes this amazing medicine, and I use it all the time. And it really, really helps, and it helps kindle that digestive fire as well. And it's something that everyone generally uses. So I just wanted to kind of clarify that because I know there's some confusion about garlic postpartum.
I actually have never heard that. And I didn't know that it could cause breastfeeding issues. I feel like until this time around, I think my mother-in-law said something, and I had never heard of it before.
Yeah.
Like, just sensitivity with the baby or
Hmm. Yeah.
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 Mhm.
Can cause more, gas in the baby and issues, colicky issues and stuff. If
Yeah.
it was raw or something like that. So
Yes. Interesting. Because when I was 2 months postpartum, I don't know if this is, like, too far out, but I got sick, and this might sound gross, but I made, like, on the stove, I boiled garlic, cinnamon, turmeric, honey, and just boiled it all together and drank it as tea, like, every night. So I
yeah.
put garlic in there with it, but I didn't notice, like, anything crazy with her, but it was I'm like and I would just, like, swallow a garlic clove raw
Right.
because I was sick and
Oh,
I'm like, "I need to get
yeah.
better."
Yeah. Ah, yeah, that's interesting. That tea that you're talking about, that's super similar to the tea that I was using for COVID. That was like a recommended type of COVID remedy, honestly.
Oh,
We're
nice.
doing a tea like that. So that's interesting. But yeah, I would imagine if you did a tea, I can't imagine that being a big deal, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Raw garlic clove, on the other hand, I could see that being a problem.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
I hate being sick, and I never got sick until I had a toddler, and now I've gotten, like, sick twice this year, and it's just been, like, years before
Yeah.
I had been sick, like, I don't remember being this sick since, like, high school, so, like, almost 20 years,
Oh, wow.
and, like, just with the gunk like, I mean, I would get a little cold here and there, get a little cough, whatever, but this year it was, like, on the couch, almost out of commission, and I'm like, "What is happening?" I'm not used to this. What about turmeric? Because I know that that has some digestive benefits. Is that something postpartum that you could use as well, or not really?
It's a really good question. Yes, I do use it postpartum, but I do want to say that I feel like turmeric, is like everybody's like, just put turmeric in it. Kind of like turmeric is good for everything, and for the most part, it is. But it is in the spectrum of like either being rejuvenating or cleansing. Like the opposites of that. It is cleansing. And so that is something that we just have to be careful about postpartum because we're wanting to rejuvenate, not cleanse. So we were trying to upbuild our bodily tissue instead of like get rid of it.
Mhm.
So that's something to know. I do use it on a lot of my cooking because if you just use a little bit, it's totally fine. Um, but if you did it in excess, then it can potentially dry up breast milk. So you just have to be careful, because I know people are really into their golden milk and stuff. And I have made, postpartum milk tonics, which are excellent, FYI. If you can do cow milk, that is an amazing medicine. It should be at least cream top, so not homogenized. Um, you know, Raw is great also, or as fresh as it can be, type of thing. But
Mhm.
that is the only food that goes straight to the reproductive organs. So, like in Ayurveda, so if I eat an apple today, it takes 30 days for it to go through all of the tissue layers of the body, and the deepest tissue layer is your reproductive organs. So that's how long it takes to nourish all of those layers. But with milk, it's like one of those like cheat. I don't know. It's kind of like a quick thing where it goes immediately to the reproductive organs. So that is, if that's something that you do anyway, or that you can do if you're not allergic to it, then doing like a warm milk tonic with some sort of spices in there, cardamom or cinnamon or nutmeg. Nutmeg helps you sleep. So doing this type of thing before bed is also really good to help you get great sleep.
Mhm.
That
Yeah.
is, yeah. So that's another little quick, nice thing that mamas can easily add to
Yeah.
their postpartum routine.
If anybody listening lives in the Chicagoland area, I don't know if you have a Woodman's where you live. We recently just got a Woodman's here, and I found an Amish milk there that is non-homogenized and has a cream top. and I
Yeah.
haven't bought milk in years. I cannot tell you the last time I bought a gallon of milk, but I actually have bought this recently, and have enjoyed it in different things. So, it's hard to find, which we haven't never done like a milk episode on here, which is like a whole nother topic, but, um, basically like most over the counter milk, they boil all the nutrients out of it and then add it back in, and it's not necessarily in a form that like your body can really
Yeah.
absorb that well. So, I know there's a lot of different things you hear about raw milk. I'm a fan of it. So, grew up on, I just was at a family reunion last month, and my husband likes to tell the story. I have a cousin who's 6'9", and my family is huge. Like my dad's family, all the, even all the girls, the guys, everyone is so tall. And we were talking to my cousin who's 6'9", and they had a cow growing up, and he would drink 1 to 2 gallons of milk a day because he was a growing teenage boy.
Mhm.
And I was like, you would drink almost 2 gallons of milk a day? And he's like, you don't get this big not drinking milk. Like, that's the only way they'd like milk the cow to replenish his calories because he was growing so much. So, also if you look into like Dr. Weston Price's work and the dental stuff, there's a lot of interesting things on like raw dairy and things like that. So just a quick side note for people listening, since we haven't dove into the dairy episode, we will do one day. But if you could find non-homogenized, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
I don't know,
Yeah.
is there like a place in your area? Is there like a certain grocery store, that carries it or anything like that?
Yeah, actually, there's a brand called Strauss. They they have plastic, regular kind of gallon jugs, but a lot of the time I see it in like a half a gallon glass bottle.
Mm-hmm.
But that company has cream top milk. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's how you know it's not homogenized, is if it's cream top, because homogenization just means that they've been, mixing all of the cream molecules into the rest of the milk, and that makes the milk more shelf stable. And so that's kind of one of the reasons why, it helps the milk keep longer. But it just, when you homogenize the milk, they chop up the particles so small that it becomes like the body doesn't recognize what it is and can reject it or attack it. And so that's one of the reasons why, some people are allergic to milk. And also just in Ayurveda, you never drink milk cold because it's already so heavy in general and, mucousy, that you want to heat it up a little bit so, you can digest it and it's not so heavy and mucousy in the body.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I didn't know that about milk either. What
Mhm.
about like fermented foods? Because you hear so many different things about that. Is that something that would help the body postpartum or not really?
Well, you have some good questions. So fermented fermented food, um, but not all, but as a general rule, I would say it's not recommended postpartum, because what we're working with is we're trying to rejuvenate the body. And in Ayurveda, there's these different qualities. And so the sattva or sattvic quality is like kind of like, you could translate as like pure. And it's like your baby, for example, is very sattvic. They're super pure, and so the opposite quality of that is tamasic, which is kind of like dull and dark and dead, basically. Or it has a degenerative energy. And so when you're recovering from birth, you're trying to regenerate your body. And so by putting things in your body that are degenerative in nature can be kind of not ideal. Some heavy fermented foods are not recommended. If it was like, like fresh yogurt or something like that, or some really fresh fermented, then you probably get away with it. But in general, when I'm like cooking for mamas and in my cookbook and all of that stuff, I don't have any fermented foods really, because it's, more on the no side than it is of the yes side that could cause it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you have also said that postpartum diet can help your baby sleep like a baby, like the term they use, which
Yeah.
isn't even a real term because it's usually not true. Um, So your diet can affect how your baby sleeps. I'd love for you to kind of talk about that a little bit and like maybe give us a couple of foods to try out.
Yeah, right. Okay, so that is, pertaining to mamas that are breastfeeding. So yes, the foods that you eat get transferred to your baby via the breast milk. And so that's why it's so important for you to have a strong digestive fire, because if you're not able to digest the foods that you're eating, then that, that undigestible, it's going to go into the breast milk and make your breast milk not super digestible. And so when your baby has a brand new digestive system, it's just, it makes a really, really big deal. It makes a really big difference. And um, so that digestive power is very relevant. And so, for example, like doing some sort of having a digestive with your food every time you eat is a really good idea. So, for example, something that's super simple that you could do is just roast some fennel seeds. And you can even put a little salt on it, And so that's something that's super simple. You just eat a little handful of those or something after your meal. And fennel also is well known to promote breast milk. And so it's kind of like hitting two birds with one stone in that way. You could also make a tea out of it and drink that. But having some sort of digestive with your meals is a really good idea. So no matter what you're eating, at least you're kind of nourishing your digestive system in that way. So, but like we were talking about, so when you are going through your diet and when you're going through your postpartum recovery, there's different phases. So, like for example, days 1 through 3, you would focus on really, really simple foods like the rice congee, some like soups and puddings, things like that. And then as your digestion kind of grows, then you would add a little more complicated foods. So then you can, add more veggies to your soups, but you want to keep it soupy, and I my thing is a vegetarian diet, or not really my thing, but the Ayurvedic postpartum diet is mostly vegetarian, and it has to do with what I was talking about earlier about the like degenerative quality or the dead quality. And it just meat is a little harder to digest, really. And so if you're going to have meat, you just have to ease it into your diet. So you start with like bone broth, for example, and then, add a little bit of meat to your soup. And then, by day 21, then you can have your chicken on your plate with other things on your plate where you're like, okay, I graduated to a plate instead of a bowl type of thing. But having your following the postpartum diet where you're like taking steps towards eating food that's more, like rice on a plate, or having your chicken on a plate or whatever. It's like it starts off as soup, and then as your digestive fire gets stronger and you're like, okay, I'm really hungry, like I feel really hungry and I feel like I can eat this. And so that's kind of that, following that kind of pattern of working with your digestion slowly will help build that digestive fire, so that way no matter what you're eating, that you'll be able to digest it. Because the fact is that if you are not able to digest those foods, then your baby is going to have a hard time digesting them. So once your baby has a hard time digesting, then what happens? you know Baby has a gas and feels really uncomfortable in their belly, so then they're crying and arching their back, and not able to sleep, like not able to sleep for long periods. And then what happens at that point? So if they're not able to sleep for long periods, then you're not able to sleep for long periods, and then your rest really it you're not getting the rest that you need. And then that that rest that you need is so important for your recovery. And so it can kind of spiral in that way out of control. And of course, like hearing your baby scream and cry is really like the hardest thing in the world. Like when I had my baby, I had some Ayurvedic education. So this is, my baby's about to turn 20 next month. And like that was my big challenge, with her, is she got really bad baby colic. And it was so hard. She was either eating sleeping or screaming for 3 months, and it was awful. And so that's something that, in a lot of circumstances can be solved through diet,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah, well, I feel like we're learning so much because even, 30 years ago, I guess my husband was a colicky baby, and, you just know so many other things to look for now versus back then, like, I feel like, at least, like, if you're in this world, like, you hear so much about it, like, different things that could be affecting the baby, whether it's something that you're eating, something with them, like, other things going on because, um usually it's an underlying issue. It's not just that your baby's colicky. So that's definitely hard. I can't imagine, like, thankfully I haven't had a colicky baby, but I, like, can't imagine how much stress that put on you as a mom, that's eating, sleeping, screaming.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's hard too, I was young and I didn't really know what to do. And I knew just feeding her wasn't the answer, but I didn't know what else to do, And at that time, I was 22. It's like I didn't know anything. And like now I know, I'm like, gosh, well, okay, babies have, the sucking reflex in them. That's a soothing, that soothes them. But you don't have to give them your breast every time to soothe them. And that was part of something that I learned later down the line, where, depending where you're at, you can use like your pinky finger, or if you're open to a pacifier, I really don't think that's a bad thing. So it's like just being able to find a solution to have them be able to soothe using their sucking, using the sucking, but not always on your boob, basically, because babies also at a certain point, need time when they're old enough, like they need time in between meals too, to also nourish their own digestion. But when it comes to when you were asking like what foods you think would, really help um, with babies and, helping them sleep deeper, um, well, just having nourishing breast milk. I mean, and milk, like we were talking about, milk is really good for sleep, just like with babies, our own breast milk, makes them sleepy. It's like warm milk is like a sleep aid. Um, but, I would say using a lot of nourishing oils like ghee or sesame oil in your food, and having those digestive spices in your food. And if you're having like an issue with your baby, with them maybe not going to the bathroom regularly, or you feel like they have gas and things like that, where that's keeping them awake, then I would recommend eating something like the rice congee recipe, which I have as a blog post on my website, shakticare.com, but also in my cookbook, Mama's Menu. But something like that, or some nourishing pudding like tapioca pudding without egg, something like that, where it's just really, easy to digest and nourishing on your own system, will help them. And then doing something like the fennel, whether it's fennel seeds or fennel tea or something like that, that's very, very gentle. And one final thing about that is that's not food related, but doing a nice little oil massage for your baby, especially on their tummy, is extremely soothing for them and will make a huge difference in their little lives.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I will include in the show notes a recipe to your the blog post with your rice congee pudding. Um, but before we wrap up, for people listening who might be like, okay, this is all new information. I don't even know where to start, or it seems overwhelming postpartum to make sure that I'm eating exactly the right things and doing all the right stuff to soothe this. Like, what would you suggest are maybe just a couple of simple things for somebody listening, like maybe where they could start um, if they're planning their postpartum journey?
Okay. Well, definitely focus on your digestive fire. So that's something that you can do. So either do a tea that is very good for postpartum for breast milk as well as digestion is fennel fenugreek tea. So fennel tea, so it would be a ratio of 2 to 1 fennel seeds to fenugreek. And so you basically just make a mixture of, say, for example, 2/3 cup of fennel, 1/3 cup of fenugreek, and then mix it up, and then just take 1 teaspoon of that, and then just pour that. What I do is just like take a teaspoon of the seeds, put it into like a half a gallon ball jar, and then just boil water and pour the water over the seeds and let it steep for 10 minutes. And it's a really light infusion that's actually, it's not drying to the body. You can drink it like water. And so that's a very simple thing that you can do to just ensure that you are like promoting good breast milk and also your digestion after birth. So that's something that you can do. Another thing is just make sure that you have some good digestive spices for your food. You could even make your own little mix if you wanted to. I have a mix that I call it Mama's Masala that is available in my cookbook. Where it's like that's something that I give as a gift a lot to mamas, when I go to their blessing ways or something. So it's like no matter what kind of food you get, no matter what people bring you, um, if you're doing a meal train or something like that, or you're in the hospital, whatever it is, you have your little mix that you can sprinkle on all your food. So it's like a nice little, you can ensure that you're getting some of those digestive spices that are going to help you. Because the thing is not only just with your breast milk, but your digestive fire is really important, for your rekindling your energy of your body, because after birth, like I mentioned, like your whole body grows cold. And so you need to regain your internal heat in general. So that includes your digestive fire, that includes in general your body, getting your circulation going again, getting all of that like, oxygen rich blood flowing. So like putting, another really simple thing to do, which I recommend, is doing a hot water bottle on your wound every day,
Mhm.
you know, after you have your baby. So you're like getting lots of blood flow to that area and healing that area. And
Yeah.
so, yeah. And if you're interested to learn more about Ayurveda and about postpartum diet, I have a ultimate guide for postpartum diet on my website, shakticare.com, which is really, really popular. And yeah, and then I also have a master class that's free. And you can just go to that at shakticare.com/heal. And you'll learn lots of information, but not too much, all digestible information about how you can better heal from birth. Because yeah, doing the postpartum planning before your baby is ideal and so great. If you're listening to this and you're still pregnant, please like do your postpartum plan, because once you have your baby, all bets are off, everything's out the window, and then you're just, it's much harder to figure things out at that point.
Mhm. Right. Yeah. I agree with that for sure. I'll include in the show notes all the links that you just said and a link to your cookbook. So for people listening, that would be an easy thing to grab if you want to make some of these recipes and even have, take pictures to send to people who are going to be bringing you food, or even assign it like, hey, like my sister can make this for me, my mother-in-law can make this, my mom can make that, like whatever, like even don't be afraid to ask people if they're like, "Hey, like, can I bring you something?" Like, it's not like obviously not something that's like an ingredient that they're never going to be able to find or make or do, but there's so many things in there that are like very doable that you can make to have people bring to you. Um, because it is really important that you do take that time to recover, to let your body heal, and just also to feel loved by the people around you, feeling that support for you and your baby, and giving yourself that time to really bond and not have to worry about those other things. So I'll include the link to the recipe book, your ultimate guide, and your free masterclass, and also where they can find and follow you on Instagram and connect with you. If you want to say what your Instagram is right now, I go ahead and we'll leave it that for those listening.
Okay, yeah, it's Shakti Care at Shakti Care. So SHAKTICARE, Shakti Care.
Shakti Care. Perfect. Awesome. I want to thank you so much Ameya, for coming on and for all of this information and sharing your wisdom and expertise with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for allowing me to be on here. And I'm just really grateful to share and hope all of those mamas out there can have better postpartum recoveries because of it.
Yeah, absolutely.